Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Even if you don't care about passing on your genes, it is still better to do eugenic breeding in a commune by having sperm bank sperm kids. Having sperm bank sperm kids is better than going MGTOW because you will have smart kids who will be able to take care of you when you're too old to work. Who will take care of you when you're too old if you're MGTOW, right? Like, now I'm sure a lot of MGTOW men are going to say that, like, you don't have to spend all that money raising kids, and so you're going to have saved a ton of extra money, and then you can retire with that. Okay, theoretically, that's a good point. But if a MGTOW guy is having to spend less money because of not having kids and is therefore able to save more money, most guys in that situation where they have all this extra disposable money because of not having a wife or kids, it's really hard to resist the temptation when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s to not spend some of it. I mean, sure, I'm sure these guys will save a fair amount of it, but maybe not enough, because people tend to underestimate how much you really need to save for retirement. I think it's the Chinese who have a saying that you should have your weight in gold in order to be able to retire. That is how much gold you should have. Do you really think most guys, most MGTOW guys, or even ones making good money, are really saving that much, or really being that frugal to where they're able to save their weight in gold by the time they're retired, they're ready to retire? I don't think so. It's the temptation is too great to spend some of that money. They'll save some, but they won't save quite enough, and so then they'll end up, not having enough, right? Maybe they'll be able to save like more than a family man, obviously, these MGTOW guys, but they probably won't be able to save enough to retire, or won't be able to save enough to retire comfortably enough, or at as early enough of an age as they wanted to, or the retirement will arrive before they know it, and then they'll be like, God damn, dude, I thought I would have more money by this time, or I thought I'd be able to retire by now, A lot of MGTOW guys will have the thought that it doesn't matter if they don't save enough because they don't need to live. Like when you're young, a lot of times you think like, oh, fuck it, that's 20, 30, 40 years from now. Like who cares, right? Like I don't think I'm even going to live that long. Fuck it. Like I'm just going to spend the money, or whatever. I'm going to take risks with my life. I'm going to do dangerous things because, who cares? I probably won't live long anyway. And what's the point of living if you're not going to enjoy your life, right? So you take all these risks when you're younger that you shouldn't be taking, You play football and you fuck up your knees or give yourself a bunch of concussions and then you get brain damage. You get dementia in your 50s or something because you're doing football, or your knees are all fucked up by the time you're in your 40s or 50s because of playing football, or whatever other stupid thing that you were doing that harms your health or your finances or whatever when you're younger, So, like, a lot of these MGTOW guys, when they're young, they're going to think, it doesn't matter if I don't save enough because I don't have to live. I don't have to take care of anyone. I don't have any kids. I don't have a wife or anything. I don't have anybody that I really love who I need to keep seeing, and I need to preserve my health so that I can keep seeing. It's just me. So, like, who cares if, I don't have enough to retire when it's time to retire? I'll just kill myself, right? Like, a lot of MGTOW guys, I'm sure, will have that idea. Like, if not, like, overtly, then it'll probably kind of almost be in the back of their mind like that, even if it's not quite conscious, right? Like, I'll just kill myself if I'm 60 or 65 and I can't retire because I spent all my money. Fuck it. Problem solved. Life will be hell anyway then because, the government's going to collapse and it'll all be shit anyway. So, fuck it. I'll just, enjoy myself over the next 20 years and then boom, I'm heading out. Problem solved. That's the thinking, I think, of a lot of guys. It's just almost natural sort of to think that way. I think especially, at least in a fucked up country like this, at this time in history, right? So thinking that way will cause these MGTOW guys to rationalize their greed and their tendency to spend more money than they should. And then they really will end up in the position of having to kill themselves when they're in their 60s because of not having saved enough money. And they won't be able to keep working forever either because the IQ requirement for a middle-class job steadily rising, decade after decade while they're working until eventually they find themselves unemployable at the end of their lives, at 60 years old. Maybe their mind is still sharp and their health is still good, but their IQ is no longer high enough to work. Maybe it was 115 or 120 before, but now you need like a 125, 130 IQ to have a middle-class job. And so now they're no longer employable. So if they've not saved enough to retire, they won't be able to retire, but they're no longer employable. So then what are they going to do then? They don't have any kids to take care of them. So boom, suicide time, right? Like what else can they do, right? But if a guy has kids instead of going MGTOW, then having kids forces the guy to be frugal. And this automatically upgrades his character, just like being forced to be frugal like this. And being morally good in one way often impacts their morality in other ways as well, right? Like if you are, sexually restrained, this will make you more disciplined, and it'll also be more likely to make you more peaceful, so that you're more likely to meditate as well, right? And being frugal is more likely to make it so that you have more extra money, so then you're more likely to be generous. And then being generous makes you more compassionate. You see, so like being more moral in one way often makes you more moral in other ways as well. It's like a cascading effect type of thing, right? Like there's overlap between virtues, they're all connected. So if you're more virtuous in one way, it makes you at least somewhat more virtuous in at least one or two other ways, right? Moral improvement in one area tends to lead to moral improvement in other areas. But having kids also makes it so that the guy is essentially being forced to save for his retirement because his kids are his retirement plan. This is how it was for all of human history. Guys saved for their old age and had lots of kids, and many of those kids died in their first year or two of life. But some of them survived into adulthood, and those surviving kids also took care of him and his wife, their mother, when he was too old to work anymore. They took care of him in his old age, a guy's kids did. So he saved for his own retirement, and his kids took care of him as well. So kids are a man's retirement plan. They always were, and they always will be. And if you think that Social Security will make it so that you don't need to have kids to take care of you when you're old, then you're gravely mistaken. Social Security is going to be bankrupt soon. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you will never collect a dime in Social Security. It will have gone bankrupt, and the petrodollar will have collapsed, and we will have eaten all our cultural and financial seed corn, and the EROI of oil will be even lower, thus making oil untenable as a fuel source, and the incel problem will be causing massive societal chaos due to having grown much bigger than it is today, and the societal chaos will be even worse because there will also be societal chaos caused by the immigration and the increase in liberal politicians who will be voting for stupider laws and projects done by government, which will only suck even more wealth from the people and then waste that wealth, making everyone even more poor. Because, the more miscegenation there is, and due to immigration and miscegenation propaganda, the more, the smarts of people of the next generation will be lower. And then, being dumber, people will vote for liberal politicians more because they're idiots who believe politicians and they don't understand the government has no money. The only money the government has is what it steals from you in taxes and inflation and stuff like that. You see, so like when politicians promise people things like, oh yeah, we're going to make these programs, give you this money. They're so stupid. These low IQ people are so stupid. They don't even realize that the politicians are just promising to rob them more so that they can give them the money right back. Right? Like, or the people are so stupid they don't realize that money has to be stolen from someone. So even if it's not being stolen from them and then given back to them, only a percentage of which is given back because the rest is wasted by government, they don't even realize that, like, if it's not being robbed from them, it's being robbed by other people. I mean, it's being robbed from other people, like rich people. And then those rich people don't like that, and then they control the government even more, get more tax loopholes written into the law and stuff so that it doesn't actually affect them. And then the tyranny increases, and then, the government has to do more money printing to steal it from the regular people by way of inflation instead of taxation. So then they're just stealing it from the common people after all. The politicians. So when they promise you more free stuff, that's not free stuff. They're just promising to steal from you more and then give you back only a fraction of that money. But stupid people don't understand this. So, the more miscegenation increases, the more we're going to get more liberal politicians until we become a one-party country. No more Republicans, just Democrats. And then we get tons of, tyrannical laws and tons of, wealth sucking and projects that are retarded. And then you get just massive insanity and massive poverty in the U.S. because of government being massively powerful and just doing stupid shit with it, and thereby destroying not only the people, but itself as well. Because the government is a parasite. It depends on the people. Just like, top men who are promiscuous are parasites. They depend on the daughters of traditionalist men so that they can have extra women to have sex with. You see, like, parasites always depend on a host, and when they kill the host, they're killing themselves as well. So government will be destroying itself as well while it's, from destroying the people. But, this is all due to, well, it's irrelevant really what it's due to, but, well, for the purposes of this discussion. But my point is, like, you're never going to collect a dime in Social Security. Even if the Social Security isn't bankrupt, there are all these other negative things. The EROI of oil going down, the petrodollar ending, the incel problem, being way, way bigger. Imagine how violent society will be if 50 or 60% of men are incels. And just all the insanity, the increased crime rate because the higher percentage of unemployed men due to the increasing miscegenation and the people with lower smarts that miscegenation creates, that's going to make society even more chaotic and violent and unstable. Like all that insanity will make government even more broke, and thus, even if Social Security were not on track toward bankruptcy, which it is, it would still be the case that Social Security would almost certainly collapse because of all the other financial problems that the U.S. will be experiencing in 30 to 40 years. And not just financial problems, but cultural problems, crime problems, financial problems, tyranny problems, civil or revolutionary war problems, etc. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, you're not going to see a dime in Social Security, even though you're paying in. But that money's just going right back out to pay the people who are collecting now. That money's not being saved for you. Yeah, you're paying in, and yeah, you should get that money back. That's your fucking money. But you're not going to get it back. You're not going to see a dime of it. Even if you're in your 40s, you might still not see a dime in Social Security money paid to you. So because it's going bankrupt soon. I can't remember what the projections are, but I think it's in like the next 10 or 20 years it's going to go bankrupt. So, even if they, up the age at which you have to be to collect, and, they cut the benefits and all do all this shit, like, it'll still probably be bankrupt in 30 years, So if you're a young MGTOW, then you can't expect to get a dime in Social Security. And your earning power will be lower in 30 to 40 years when you want to retire. You probably will not have saved enough money to retire on your own without help. And yet you will be earning less money because of your mind being less sharp, your creativity being depleted, along with your physical vitality. You no longer have the energy to work long hours, and especially because the IQ requirement for a middle-class job having risen. If you have 100 IQ, maybe even if you have a 110 IQ, you'll be lucky to even still have a job at all in 30 years. Because by that time, most of the jobs, maybe all the jobs, will require a 120 IQ or higher. Maybe a 130 IQ or higher. And all the rest of the jobs will have been taken over by automation. That is, the jobs that require 115 IQ or lower, or 118 IQ or lower, or whatever, maybe a 128 IQ or lower. All those jobs will have been taken over by automation, robots and computers and such. And stuff like that. But if you have sperm bank sperm kids instead, then they will have higher IQs than you, and one of them might have an IQ way above yours, right? Maybe you have like 4 sperm bank sperm kids, and one of them's got a 110 IQ, and 2 of them have, 115 or 120 IQs, but one of them has like a 140 IQ or a 150 IQ, right? So then he makes way more money than his siblings, right? And then because you raised them, they'll care about you, right? Because they're not your biological material, but you're their only father, the only father they ever knew, so they care about you like a regular son cares about his father, right? And then they'll be able to get good jobs, or at least one of them will, because they're high IQs, and they'll be able to still be working when you're ready to retire, or when you can't work anymore because your IQ no longer being high enough. And your high IQ sperm bank sperm kids will be able to take care of you at that time. You can go live with them. Or you'll be living in a commune that you raise them in. Like, you don't have to raise them in the commune, but if you do, then you'll still be living in a commune, and then your kids might be living there, or they might not, but either way, they could contribute money to the commune to pay for the food and electricity that you're using by continuing to live in the commune after you can no longer work, right? And if you're MGTOW, you don't care about having kids anyway. So you clearly don't care about passing on your genes. So then, why not have only sperm bank sperm kids and no kids that are biologically yours? That way, you have much higher chances of having at least one of your sperm bank sperm kids having a very high IQ, like 140 or above, and therefore being able to make very good money and take care of you in your old age. If you have 2 biological kids and 2 sperm bank sperm kids, then that's only mediocre odds, maybe even bad odds, that one of those 2 sperm bank sperm kids will have a very high IQ and therefore be able to take care of you in your old age. Because maybe your wife only has a 100 or 110 IQ, and then the sperm bank sperm guy had a 180 IQ, but you combine those two, especially considering the reversion to the racial mean, the kids might only have 120 IQs or something. That's good, but it's not great. You know what I mean? So you really should have as many sperm bank sperm kids as possible, because even if all the sperm donors have 180 IQs, it may be fairly low odds that you'll get a kid with, above 140 IQ. So you really, if you have 4 or 6 sperm bank kids, that's even better, much higher odds that you'll have at least one of them be 140 in IQ or above. You see, it's like, so you have better chances of having a high IQ kid if you have only sperm bank sperm kids, like having 4 sperm bank sperm kids and no biological kids, as opposed to having two biological kids and 2 sperm bank sperm kids, right? And the better the chances that you have a really high IQ kid, the better the chances of having a kid that will be able to take care of you in your old age. So, that's really important to understand. And another bonus is that if you have only sperm bank sperm kids, then you don't have to have another guy and his wife doing the whole sperm bank sperm breeding thing with you, right? Because, like, if you're trying to pass on your genes and you want to have half your kids biologically yours and half kids from sperm bank sperm, you need another guy and his wife to do the same thing. So you can marry your biological kids off to his sperm bank sperm kids, and he can marry his biological kids off to your sperm bank sperm kids. You see, so that you can pass on your genes, and so that so that everybody's grandkids will have better IQs than their parents did, right? Or at least better than their non-sperm bank sperm parent did, right? So that you can improve the IQ of your genetic line while also still passing on your genetic line by mixing it with the sperm bank sperm kids of another guy, right? But you don't have to do that if you're just going to have sperm bank sperm kids and no biological kids. You see, there's no exchange necessary like that. So you don't have to find an ally before you're able to do it. You see, you're not trying to preserve your genetic line if you're only going to have sperm bank sperm kids. So there's no need of any other people. You just have only sperm bank sperm kids, as many as you can. And you don't even need to live in a commune to do so, right? Obviously, a commune is better in terms of minimizing the chances of your wife cheating on you, minimizing the chances of her divorcing you, minimizing the chances of your kids being corrupted by the world, and being able to keep property taxes low and other expenses low so that you can save money. That's another advantage of living in a commune. The property tax isn't necessarily going to be any lower, but because you have a lot of people on a small piece of land, the property tax is lower for each individual person because you're splitting it between more people, right? Also, you can buy in bulk when you live in a commune, buy in bulk in terms of like food and stuff to keep food expenses lower, right? So you don't have to. Yeah, yes, there are advantages of living in a commune, like all those things I just mentioned: lower chance of divorce, keeping property taxes low, your kids don't get corrupted by the world, etc. But you could easily marry a woman and have only sperm bank sperm kids and just live in the world. Live in a house out in the world, then it would still work, assuming she didn't divorce you and stuff like that, right? And your sperm bank sperm kids could be MGTOW and save a lot of money if they wanted to, and then they'd be more easily able to take care of you, although you'd probably want to tell them that they should have sperm bank sperm kids as well, so that they will have kids to take care of them in their old age, right? Plus, if they continued the practice of having only sperm bank sperm kids, then it would keep producing more high IQ kids with each generation. Kids which could learn to code and then work on coding the government out of existence, instead of there being only one generation produced which would do that work of fighting the government by way of coding. If you taught your sperm bank sperm kids to all have sperm bank sperm kids of their own, and those kids had sperm bank sperm kids, and those kids had sperm bank sperm kids, then it would be like, you just have more and more and more sperm bank sperm kids. And then this means that, like, it's a situation where there never stops being a bunch of people out in society fighting the government, especially if all these sperm bank sperm kids each have more than replacement levels. Like if you have 4 sperm bank sperm kids, and then each of them have 4 sperm bank sperm kids, and then each of those have four sperm bank sperm kids, it's like, 4 becomes 16, becomes, what would it be, 64, whatever. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, you know what I mean? Like, and then pretty soon, in just a few generations, there's like hundreds or thousands of non-biological descendants of yours that were all from sperm bank sperm and that are fighting the government by way of subversive coding, right? Because each father was not biologically the father of the kid, but he still influenced the kid and taught him to be anti-government. So that anti-government belief, that belief in anarcho-capitalism, that belief in fighting the government subversively passes down from father to, sperm bank sperm son, who's not biologically his. The theory, the idea, the goal passes down from generation to generation, so they each all keep fighting the government, and there's more and more and more of them with each generation. And their IQs are always high, so they're always making good money and able to do it. And they're able to afford to have 4 sperm bank sperm kids each. They're all able to, learn to code and fight the government that way. That way, they're all able to, save and sound money and fight the government that way because they have a lot of extra money because they make good money because they were from sperm bank sperm, etc. And it would actually be eugenic as well. The IQs of the non-biological descendants of each guy would be better and better and better in IQ each generation. Now you may think, well, how would this be? Because, he's not even passing on his genes. So, and you're just using sperm bank sperm, 180 IQ sperm bank sperm guy the sperm from a 180 IQ guy from a sperm bank, and it's not like he's part of a gene pool with a reversion to the racial mean of like 140 or 160. So it's just going to be like, why would that, be eugenic, right? So you're going to think that it's not eugenic, right? To have only sperm bank sperm kids and then have your sperm bank sperm kids have only sperm bank sperm kids. But actually it would be eugenic because your kids, being from sperm bank sperm, will have higher IQs, and having higher IQs means that they will be able to find a smarter woman who's willing to marry them than you were, right? Like you were maybe able to marry a woman with a 100 or 110 IQ and then have sperm bank sperm kids with her. But your kids have 120 IQs, and then they're able to find, a 120 or 130 IQ woman to marry him and have sperm bank sperm kids with. So then, since the woman's IQ is higher with each generation, the mother's IQ is higher. This means her sperm bank sperm kids will be higher because have higher IQs, right? So it'll still be eugenic, even though the guys every generation are never having biologically their own kids, just sperm bank sperm kids. It would still be eugenic. The wives of each generation of sperm bank sperm sons will get smarter and smarter with each generation, so that the kids born from, not because they're getting smarter because of eugenics, but because they are, each generation of guys who's born from sperm bank sperm is smarter than the last because of being born from sperm bank sperm, so he can attract a smarter wife. You see, so then the woman is always smarter, the mother is always smarter. Because, the kids who have a 180 IQ, who are born from 180 IQ sperm, and then the mother has 100 IQ, those kids are not going to be as smart as the same exact 180 IQ guy's sperm used with a 140 IQ woman. Those kids are going to be much smarter because the woman's IQ is smarter, you see? So it's still eugenic, even if every generation of sperm bank sperm guys has only sperm bank sperm kids and no biological kids of his own. And this is important because it's not just important to have kids with higher IQs than everyone else. It's important to have IQs that get higher with each generation of descendants, even though those descendants would not be biologically related to you or to their fathers, your non-biological descendants. Yeah. And the reason it is important to have IQs that get higher with each generation is because you have to keep up with the rising IQ requirement to get a middle-class job. Just keeping up with the rising IQ requirement is not preferable either. You don't want to just keep up with it. You want to have the IQs of your descendants, whether biological or non-biological, be rising faster than the IQ requirement to get a middle-class job is rising. Otherwise, your descendants' IQs are rising at the same speed. If your descendants' IQs are rising at the same speed as the IQ requirement for a middle-class job is rising, then your descendants are just treading water. They're not getting poorer, but they're not getting richer either. You have to have your descendants' IQs rising faster than the speed at which the IQ requirement for a middle-class job is rising, or else your descendants won't be making progress, won't be getting richer, won't be getting more powerful, won't be getting more influential, won't be getting more free. And if your descendants aren't getting richer and more free, then what's the point? The real purpose of breeding is progress, and having a high IQ and a great memory, creativity, good health, good looks, and charisma is the ultimate power. It's a greater power than money, than political influence, etc. Mind is the ultimate power, and with a powerful mind, you can do almost anything. And without the power of having a mind with a very high IQ and incredible memory, you are severely limited in your power, and therefore you're not very free, nor are you able to fight for freedom. Power is freedom, and freedom is power. To have freedom, you have to have power, and the greatest power there is having a high IQ and an incredible memory. Although there are other powers, like, money and good looks and charisma, these are power as well. But high IQ and great memory and creativity are the three greatest powers. And in fact, you really should have all three. Even only if you have all three are you very powerful, because, high IQ but a bad memory is not very useful. Same thing with a great memory but a low IQ, or just an average IQ. Yeah, it's good, but it's not that great. And nor is having a really high IQ and a really great memory all that great if you're totally sterile in terms of creativity. If you have no creativity, that's no good either, You're just kind of a cog in the machine. You really, really do need all three: high IQ, great memory, and creativity. And like I was saying before, regarding having 4 sperm bank sperm kids instead of being MGTOW, having 4 and having no biological kids, having 4 sperm bank sperm kids and no biological kids is better than MGTOW from the perspective of freedom as well. How are you going to live a nice, quiet, peaceful, happy, retired life when society's utter hell all around you? And not just in America, but all across the world because of a worldwide economic collapse due to the collapse of America and all the economies of the world being interconnected like dominoes, so that when one goes down, they all go down. How are you going to live a nice, happy, retired life when it's all hell around you? right? When it's hell all around you. You have to take into consideration the importance of having a stable society around you. And that's only possible if you're free, if your country is free. And the best way to make your country free is to have high IQ kids who can learn to code and then write subversive code that marginalizes the government out of existence, just like Bitcoin is slowly doing. Going MGTOW does not get any subversive code written. So it doesn't fight the government, or at least doesn't fight it very well. It certainly doesn't help build the new world. But having sperm bank sperm kids who you raise to be anarcho-capitalists and who you teach to write subversive code so as to weaken and marginalize government so that government is eventually replaced by an anarcho-capitalism that runs online so that when government collapses, it's already been mostly replaced by a functional system online so that when government collapses, society does not collapse. When you have sperm bank sperm kids who can write subversive code, then you can accomplish this. You can help destroy government and help replace it at the same time, so that you have sane, peaceful, prosperous, virtuous, stable society to live in when you reach old age. When you're old, you'll be least able to fight the advancing tyranny, and you'll be least able to defend yourself from predatory young people around you who would love to steal your food, steal your money, etc. when the US collapses into hellish poverty sometime in the next 30 years because of us failing to, innovate government out of existence and replace it with something better, like anarcho-capitalism online. Right? Like Silk Road 3.0 and everybody using Monero and a reputation network that's free and fair and decentralized, etc. Right? Like, if the U.S. collapses because of everybody going MGTOW and nobody, subversively coding the government out of existence and coding something else into existence to replace it with, the U.S. will collapse into hellish poverty, everybody will be starving, and young people will steal all your food. You, this person who's trying to retire. Right? And you're not going to be strong enough to defend yourself from them, right? Especially when there's a lot of them. Yeah, you could have a gun and kill a few of them, but if there's like 100 of them swarming on you, how are you going to get them all? You're old. You're like in your 60s. You're not going to be able to stop them, you see? And so, it's really important to prevent the coming insanity, the collapse of the empire, by way of having sperm bank sperm kids who can code the government out of existence and create a peaceful transition from the end of government into society running on what comes next. Or what could come next, which we should, create in order to both destroy government and replace it so that we don't just have a collapse of government and nothing replacing it and then everything being utterly hellish. This is far better than going MGTOW and assisting in bringing about the collapse of government and society, but doing nothing to replace that evil system that is collapsing, thus leading to hellish chaos. That's what MGTOW is trying to do. It's trying to bring about the destruction of society, and it's not even trying to build anything to replace it with. That's totally insane. Especially considering by the time government collapses, a lot of these MGTOWs will be quite old, and then, they won't be able to fight, the young people that'll be stealing their food and trying to kill them and stuff. So having sperm bank sperm kids creates more high IQ kids to fight the rapidly advancing tyranny of the government and the multinational corporations, including the tech companies. And it's not just the government which is massively advancing tyranny through the NSA and stuff like that. It's also the multinational corporations, not just the tech companies, but all of them. And having sperm bank sperm kids allows one to have smart people who will still be employable in the future because, if the IQ requirement to have a middle-class job is like 125 in like 30 years from now, and you have kids today, then by the time those kids, are working, and by the time 30 years has come about, those kids are, 30 years old or so, or 25 or whatever if you have kids 5 years from now. This means that it's like those kids, if they have high enough IQs, they'll still be employable because of being born from sperm bank sperm. So, you need a 125 IQ to get a middle-class job, but, your sperm bank sperm kids have 130 IQs, so in 30 years, they're still employable, you see? Whereas you probably will not be employable, right? So then you'll have someone to take care of you when you're too old to work, right? Or when you're not too old to work, but when you just don't have an IQ high enough to work either, right? And wanting to have only sperm bank sperm kids would probably make it more likely that you could get a woman above your own SMV as well. Now, being willing to have half your kids by sperm bank sperm also would enable you to get a woman above your own SMV because she wants kids with as high of good of genes as possible. And most guys are not willing to have kids that are not their own. So if you are, that'll make, especially with sperm bank sperm, which is, I believe, not incentivized by the government welfare system, which, she can't get child support if she has a kid by sperm bank sperm. If she could, if women could get child support or some kind of financial assistance to have kids with sperm bank sperm, all women would be doing that instead of sleeping around and getting knocked up by some random guy because she wants the best genes possible for her kids, you see. So since you can't get child support or something or government assistance, like special government assistance, by having a kid by sperm bank sperm, this means that like she would love to have a kid by sperm bank sperm and have a guy be willing to do that with her and take care of that kid, because then she gets to have a kid with massively kick-ass genes, and she gets the kids taken care of. You see. So she would love that. So that would enable you to get a woman above your own SMV, even if you only wanted to have half your kids biologically yours with her and half the kids with sperm bank sperm. So if you want all your kids to be from sperm bank sperm, then you'll be able to get a woman way above your own SMV. Or it'll massively increase the chances of being able to get a woman above your own SMV. Or maybe not above your own SMV, but more above the SMV at which you should be able to get today, because of the SMVs being all fucked up, with women's being unnaturally high and men's being unnaturally low because of many factors, which I've talked about in many previous videos. And you won't have the character defects of a rich man because you're not rich. You're just a middle-class guy, right? So, because a lot of women don't want to be with a rich guy, because rich guys are egotistical, they are often sexually degenerate, they tend to cheat, they always want their own way. They want the woman to just be quiet and be a trophy wife, etc., right? So, like, she wants love. She wants a guy who's not going to cheat on her. She wants a guy who's not an egomaniac, etc. So she would much rather be with you than with a rich guy in a lot of cases, right? Especially if you're willing to have, sperm bank sperm kids with her so that she gets kids with top-notch genes, right? And she gets them taken care of, too, right? So this will make it more likely that you can get a woman above your own SMV, or at least above what you would otherwise be able to get, right? And even though they're not biologically yours, you'll be raising them, and you'll be able to shape their minds and teach them to be, in favor of sound money and be anti-government and pro-anarcho-capitalism. And you can teach them to be virtuous, humble, frugal, hardworking, faithful, long-sighted, benevolent, etc. They'll be your kids because you raise them. They just won't be yours biologically. Women want to have kids who have great genes so that their kids have a good chance of being successful in life. So if you're willing to have a bunch of sperm bank sperm kids with her, then the money issue is the only reason she would choose another guy with better genes than you. Because if you're willing to have sperm bank sperm kids with her, then even if she could get a 140 IQ guy to marry her, the kids she would have with him would still not be as good as the kids she could have with you, because you would be having her get pregnant with sperm bank sperm from guys with 180 IQs. You see, so the only reason she'd marry another guy instead of you would be money. And maybe looks and charisma as well. But considering the fact that guys are increasingly only interested in pumping and dumping, and considering poverty will be increasing as time goes by, this means that if you make middle-class money or live in a commune and make below-average money but can provide your wife with a middle-class standard of living because of the cost of living in the commune being low, then this means that she will be interested in marrying you, because it will be harder than ever to hook an above-average guy in the future. Both because of the growth of MGTOW as well as the fact that if the woman you're marrying only has an average IQ, then even if she's physically attractive, she will be less desirable in the future, because she won't want to just get used for sex by a top guy, but no top guys will want to marry her despite her good looks, because her IQ is just average. And those top guys will be smart enough to know that they want a smart woman so that their kids will be smart enough to be successful, right? So pretty girls with average IQs or below average IQs will have to settle for a middle-class guy in the future more and more. And so then she'll think to herself that it makes more sense to settle for you rather than for another guy, because you will be allowing her to have kids that will be better than she otherwise would be able to if she married a different 5 out of 10 guy, or an old 7 out of 10 guy with money who doesn't want to have kids because he already had kids with his first wife when he was younger and he doesn't want to have any more kids. Right? So maybe because she's pretty, she could get a 7 out of 10 guy with money, but she doesn't want him because he doesn't want kids. And she doesn't want to marry another 5 out of 10 guy. So maybe she'll marry you. Maybe you're a 4 out of 10 guy, but she'll marry you because you're willing to have, all sperm bank sperm kids. So then you get an attractive wife, you get to have kids who are not biologically yours, but who you can raise to, hate government and love freedom. And then you can, have them code government out of existence. So you get to fight the evil system. So, it's not like you don't get anything out of it. You also get kids who, at least one of them smart enough probably to take care of you in your old age. So, even having only kids with sperm bank sperm and no biological kids is still massively in your benefit, right? And this dynamic of IQ being more important in both women and men in the future, and it affecting their SMV, their marriage prospects, this will mean that if you only want to have sperm bank sperm kids, then you'll be able to either get a high IQ girl who is not very physically attractive, or a girl who is above average in physical attractiveness, but who only has average intelligence, right? So, because women's IQ will become more and more important in the future, because every man wants to have kids that, have good IQ so the kids can be successful, successful, this means that if you're willing to have only sperm bank sperm kids, you will have to choose between you will have the option of choosing between two different kinds of women, which are better than you would normally be able to get. You'll be able to either get a girl who's very smart but is not very physically attractive or mediocre in looks, or you'll be able to get a woman who's actually quite attractive, maybe a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10, but who only has average intelligence. And not only is having sperm bank sperm kids better for your chances of having a kid who will be able to take care of you when you reach your 60s, but having only sperm bank sperm kids means you will also be producing more kids who will be able to fight the government by way of coding. You know, if you do the sperm bank sperm breeding thing and have 2 kids that are biologically yours and 2 that are from sperm bank sperm, then you're creating 2 kids who might be smart enough to code and thereby fight the government. But if you have 0 biological kids and 4 sperm bank sperm kids, then you're creating more kids who might be smart enough to code and thereby fight the government. So either you're upping your chances of having at least 1 kid that will be able and willing to fight the government by way of coding, or if all your sperm bank sperm kids are able and willing to fight the government by way of coding because of having high enough IQs to do so, then by having only sperm bank sperm kids, you're assuring that you're having more kids who can fight the government. And thus it's still better to have 4 kids who are fighting the government than it is to have 2 kids that are fighting the government and 2 kids which are not fighting the government because of not being smart enough to learn to code because they're biologically yours, right? Not sperm bank sperm kids. The more high IQ kids that you have, the more trouble you are making for the government. And the more you're increasing humanity's chances of survival and humanity's chances of being free in the future, instead of being totally enslaved like the elites want to do to us and are already doing to us. Having lots of high IQ kids who can code the government out of existence is the only way to fight the encroaching tyranny so that we are not utterly enslaved over the next few decades. I mean, it's true that we have already been completely enslaved, basically. I mean, just read 1984. Almost everything in it has already come true. You know, TVs which listen to you. You know, like torturing citizens. Like, you know, massive, just absolutely insane, totally opposite of the truth propaganda that is utterly pervasive, etc. Like, everything in 1984 has already come true, but it's also equally true that we are going to get way, way more enslaved over the next few decades if we don't fight it. So just because we've been completely enslaved now doesn't mean it's not going to get way, 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 way worse if we don't fight it. There's no way to have a society with peace and prosperity and freedom if we don't have lots of subversive coders fighting the government. There just isn't. This should be obvious to everyone. And the only way to create more subversive coders is to make sure more such kids are conceived and born, and make sure such kids are raised to be anti-government and are raised to learn to code, and raised to believe in doing as much subversive coding as possible in order to do their part to destroy government and the evil that always goes along with government, so that people can be free and prosperous and not have to pay taxes to fund genocidal wars waged merely to increase the wealth and power of those who are already rich and powerful. If you don't believe me, then read, 2-time Medal of Honor winner Smedley Butler's little pamphlet called War is a Racket. You can read it for free online. War is a Racket. You know, R-A-C-K-E-T. War is a Racket. The guy made it all the way up to 2-star general. And like I said, he won the Medal of Honor twice, which is super rare. He might be the only one who's ever won it twice. I can't remember. Even if he's not the only one, there's very few people who have won the Medal of Honor twice. He also helped stop a coup against the United States government by the corporations. This guy was an absolute hero, and he finally realized after he got out of the military that he had just been used by the corporations and the government on behalf of the corporations to, wage wars in other countries for the benefit of our corporations, right? Like that's why he wrote that little pamphlet, War is a Racket. He wrote it several decades ago, and yet it remains true today. If anything, it's even more true today. We are in a difficult time, because the same thing's happening right now as it always was, even back then. We're in a difficult time in human history right now. People are too safe, so they don't want to risk their lives to use the Second Amendment for what it's for, to overthrow the government. But people are not smart enough yet because genetic engineering is not yet being used to make everyone's IQs high. And so people don't have high enough IQs, and thus they're easily manipulated, and they can't even use code to fight the government if they want to because they don't have IQs high enough to learn to code. But freedom could be completely lost, and or humanity could become doomed to extinction if we don't breed as many high IQ subversive coders as possible within the next 20 to 30 years. There's nothing more important than making sure humanity survives, and after that, there's nothing more important than preserving and expanding freedom until we all eventually have absolute freedom. Freedom is capitalism, and capitalism is freedom. Freedom is power, and power is freedom. Money is power, and so the only system where the largest number of people have the most power, and therefore, is the world free, is a system where everyone gets to keep every dollar that they earn because of there being no taxation, because of there being no government. Anarcho-capitalism becomes more and more inevitable as time goes by for multiple reasons, which I'll go into in other videos. But we should not let this fact that anarcho-capitalism becomes more and more inevitable as time goes by. We should not let this fact make us complacent, because human survival is not guaranteed. Anarcho-capitalism is it's only the case that anarcho-capitalism is increasingly likely if humanity survives. But human survival is not guaranteed. And so, do you really want to fail to do what is necessary today so that it takes an extra 200 to 400 years before anarcho-capitalism comes into existence, assuming we survive at all? Like, even if we survive, even if human survival somehow is guaranteed and we're not going to go extinct, well, that doesn't mean that, if we do the wrong thing today, it won't massively delay the arrival of anarcho-capitalism, thereby cause, massive environmental damage, misery to many, many people, all kinds of evil things, right? Like, it's just better to get anarcho-capitalism as early as possible rather than delay it by being cowardly and foolish and short-sighted and hedonistic so that anarcho-capitalism takes another extra 200 to 400 years than it could have arisen before it arises, right? Like, think of all the tremendous suffering and injustice that will occur if the arrival of anarcho-capitalism doesn't happen in 50 or 100 years, but instead happens in 3 or 4 or 500 years. Because of us not doing what was necessary today to make sure that at this important point in human history, humanity went down the right road and freedom was established. If we don't make sure this tipping point tips in the right direction, if we're hedonistic and lazy and short-sighted, freedom won't be reestablished, and then anarcho-capitalism might not arrive for hundreds of years, assuming we survive at all. The only moral thing to do is to not be defeatist or fatalistic or lazy or hedonistic, and instead, we need to do what is necessary to bring about anarcho-capitalism by creating as many high IQ coders as possible so that there are as many anti-government fighters out there as possible. I'm not saying that you're morally obligated to not have any of your own kids, but if you are fine with having no biological kids of your own, such as most MGTOWs are, then it both makes more sense from a selfishness perspective, and it makes more sense in terms of a nobility service to humanity viewpoint as well, to have as many sperm bank sperm kids as you can. It makes way more sense than going MGTOW. This has been Redshift. Hopefully someone understood the truth of this. Peace.